Good afternoon and welcome to the Music and Technology Seminar at Carnegie Mellon. Our guest today is Nathaniel Blume, returning almost a year to the day from when he was a guest last year. Nathaniel is a successful television and film composer, and he has updates related to his home studio setup, his computer workflow, and the projects he's been working on since last year. He also has some details to share on how and when he gets paid for his work, and will show a scene from a television movie that was seen in public for the first time just a few days ago. And now, as a reminder, mute your audio and please welcome Nathaniel Blume to the Music and Technology Seminar.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. And thanks to Ricardo for having me back. I know I see a couple familiar faces, and I'm sure there's a lot of new people here too. So I won't talk too much about myself and how I got started, and I welcome questions about that later. If there's any gaps I've left open, but I was born in Indiana and did my undergraduate studies at Butler University in Indianapolis, where I studied music composition, and then did my master's degree at Carnegie Mellon. It has been almost 20 years now since I graduated. That was 2005. I studied music composition as well, primarily with Leonardo Ballata, but I had obviously a lot of interaction with Nancy, who's still there and is still a friend. And then I took a couple years off, moved back to Indianapolis, took a couple years off from school, that is, and I worked for the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, just in the administrative offices, while I continued to write for various freelance projects during that time, and eventually applied to the USC program, the University of Southern California program called Scoring for Motion Pictures and Television. And at the time, it was just a graduate certificate program, 1 year, and now it happens to be a master's degree program, still 1 year. And so, as you can imagine, it's an incredibly intense 1 year. It is a fantastic introduction to the industry where all of your professors are working professionals, and you are in and out of the recording studio that entire year, usually at various recording studios throughout Los Angeles, as well as the one that's on campus at USC. And for me, it was really a front door into the industry, as it is for a lot of graduates. One of the teachers in that program was Blake Neely, and he happened to be looking for an assistant when I graduated. So just within a few months of graduating USC, I started working for him. And he is an extremely prolific composer for television who, when I started with him, he had 3 television programs going at the same time on network television. And he's had as high as something like 8 or 9 going at the same time. So, as you can imagine, his team had to expand over the years. And I worked my way up from being strictly his assistant, who was going to get coffee and answer phones and emails, and as well as the studio tech. So if something stopped working, I was immediately on it to get it working again. And if he wanted to implement something new into his studio, I would be doing the research as to what we need to buy and how we're going to integrate it and things like that. So it's, as much as I learned in school, even at USC, I will say one of the hardest things to get a full grasp on is the full scope of technology. It is so wide, and every composer in the industry has a different way of working. So it's great to get all of the basics. And when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I was fortunate enough to be a student assistant with Ricardo in the recording studio, and I certainly learned an invaluable set of skills in the recording studio there. And if nothing else, it also just got me very comfortable being in a recording studio. So when I was in the USC program and we were going to all these historic stages around Los Angeles, I had a certain amount of comfortability just being in a recording studio from all the time that I had at Carnegie Mellon. So that certainly helped. But I will also say that the on-the-job training that comes with being thrown into the fire, so to speak, when you start working for someone and some part of their setup stops working is anxiety-ridden, but also exhilarating, and a fun puzzle to figure out in a lot of cases. So I certainly learned a lot from that early experience having to do that kind of stuff for a working professional. And then eventually, as Blake's team grew, I started doing more and more creative aspects of the job. So I would do additional music, orchestrating, things like that, until finally there came a time where my name started going on things. And sometimes it was with him. So it would be music by Blake Neely and Nathaniel Blume. And eventually it turned into some projects that were just me. And then all the responsibility fell on me, as well as the credit, of course. But it was a really good trajectory for me, to kind of ease into things that way. There are a million different ways into the industry, of course. There are, pop artists that make their way into scoring, rockers, composers who don't even read music necessarily, to those who are very traditionally, conservatory trained composers. It really runs the gamut, and I think that I benefited from my way into the industry for sure, to where I have a lot of confidence and experience to kind of take on pretty much anything right now. And I have, so I lived in Los Angeles, I should say, for about 13 years. And during the pandemic, I made a decision with my family to be closer to family during that time. We kind of, when you start a family, your priorities shift, and that's where we wanted to be for this chapter in our lives. And I'd kind of already established myself enough in the industry to where I felt comfortable moving to Pittsburgh. So I'm here now, and I have a home studio. This is the second floor of my garage, which is detached from my house. So fortunately, I can make all the noise I want at any time of day, and that benefits me and my family greatly as well. So I can show you a little bit about what my studio looks like and how what my workflow looks like, at risk of causing this camera to fall out of position. I'm still going to try to give you a glimpse of what I'm looking at. This is obviously my desk, and I I have um, three computer monitors on my desk as well as my TV up here, and I primarily just run video, the for the movie or television project on my TV, while these three monitors are the rest of my computer. And I'll talk about the applications that I use on this computer here in a minute. And down here, you can see my. Oops, what did I do? All right, let me see if I can get this back. Just 1 second. Oh, I know what I did. There we go. Sorry about that. I will try not to do that again. I was just trying to show you my little mini rack space down here. I have a Mac Pro down there and a couple of Focusrite RedNet interfaces, as well as a Trinoff MC Pro, which is a room tuner that I can talk about here as well. But that just kind of gives you a little glimpse at the hardware I'm working with. I used to work with three different machines doing various things. I would have one machine, sorry, as I get the camera fixed here again. I had one machine that would run Logic, which is what I would sequence in. I had another machine that would run Pro Tools, and yet another machine that was a Windows machine that was strictly an audio sampler, running samples. That setup worked really well for me for well over a decade, until I finally decided that I could soup up my Mac Pro enough to drop two of those machines and be on a one computer setup. And I really like that. It has streamlined things for me for sure. It's simplified all of my routing, and I can show you a bit about my workflow now, but it really speaks to, I think, how far technology has come over the years. When I started working for Blake Neely, he had something like a 10 computer setup. He had his Logic machine, his Pro Tools machine, and then 6 to 8 sampler machines, just to utilize the processing power that could come with all of those machines. And of course, over the years, that dwindled smaller and smaller to where we had a 3 computer setup for a long time, and now it's a 1 computer setup. And I even know some composers who have souped up a laptop, and they do all of their work on a laptop. Some just have a Mac Studio machine. There's so much power you can get in machines these days that you really don't need a bunch of machines anymore. So I'm glad to have slimmed down on that. And so, for instance, here is Logic that I always have running, and this is what I sequence in. Of course, there are many different DAWs that you can use to sequence. Cubase is probably the other major industry standard, but there's Digital Performer. There are some composers who sequence in Pro Tools, but Logic and Cubase, certainly the top two. Um, I've started out a Logic user and have not really been able to switch. It's really hard once you're established and you know everything about the application to switch, but there's nothing wrong with any of the other ones. I just happen to be familiar with Logic. Um, so here is my Logic template for this particular movie that Ricardo mentioned. It's called The Beach House Murders. And it's a Lifetime movie that aired for the first time on Saturday evening. If you would like to check it out, it is a Lifetime movie. And it was really fun to do the music, though. Super dramatic and over the top. There's, of course, a crime that happens at the beginning, and they throw a million red herrings at you throughout an hour and a half until you finally figure out what happens at the end. But I co-wrote this with a friend of mine named Mark Giovanni. So, and he lives out in Los Angeles, but we were able to do everything remote via Zoom meetings, or we would just record videos for each other and send them. So if one of us wrote a theme, we would share it with the other person, and it was all done without ever being in the same room. And that's kind of the beauty of technology these days, too. Likewise, when we would finish a cue, we would create a video and upload it to a space on the web where the director could log in, watch the video, leave comments, and if there were notes to be done, we would go ahead and do those and continue the process until the director was happy. And if it was approved, then we could shift it over into an approved area and repeat that until the entire movie was done. So just to show you here in this template, some of this stuff I kind of were sounds that I found that I thought would be appropriate for the movie, and so I sort of had some things preloaded, like this sort of dark pulse type thing, to pads, to pianos, which were used a lot in the score, and drums, strings, and the biggest shift here, now that I'm in one machine, I was able to start using the Pro Tools Audio Bridge, which I can't tell you when that was introduced, but a friend of mine alerted me to this in the last year, and I started playing with it and finally got to the point where I was comfortable enough to start using it. And that is where, in Logic, in my audio settings, rather than going out to a physical interface, my audio out of Logic is going through this Pro Tools Audio Bridge, which is essentially, it's not a piece of hardware. It is within the same machine. It's a virtual audio routing system. So this is going directly out of Logic into Pro Tools. And you can see here that when I play this piano, it is, you can see the input here in Pro Tools, which is running just behind Logic here. I didn't want to show you multiple monitors because, as I found, that starts making things smaller and smaller on your screen. So to keep things as large as possible, you can see Pro Tools here behind Logic taking the input directly out of Logic here. So if I go over to Pro Tools, you can see the full template behind here. Now, why do I do this? Why do I not have video in Logic and work that way? there's a couple different reasons for that. Primarily, I like to be able to see not only well, I don't want to, number one, set up the video every single time I open a Logic session. So this way, video is in Pro Tools. It's being run by Pro Tools, and this session is my master session that remains open all the time. And when I finish a cue, I record it into place right here in the timeline, and then I move on to the next cue and work on that and record that in place, so on and so forth, until I make it through the entire movie that you see here. Um, Another advantage is when I finish the first cue and I'm working on the second cue, all I have to do in my Logic session is set my start time, which corresponds to this time code right here, or right here, and I'm in place in Logic, and as I'm playing and writing, I can hear what I've already done in this first cue right here. So I can hear the key that I came out of. I can hear if there's any movement and what tempo that movement might be. Because when I write this cue, it needs to be as seamless as possible coming out of the previous cue. Um, in other words, you don't want to watch a movie or a TV show and have the audience be able to tell, oh, now we're on this next part here. Oh, it's starting a new cue here. Or if you create dissonance somehow coming from one scene to another, it's a little jarring for the audience too. You want the whole thing to feel like a cohesive, a cohesive piece of music and film together. So I do it this way because if I had my video in Logic and I wanted to create this seamless transition, I would have to pull this cue into Logic, put it in the right place, line it up. That's a lot more steps to have to do. So I love having the video and all finished cues in one spot right here. The other thing that is an advantage of this is, let's say I wrote this first cue 3 days ago, and I'm at this scene that's way down here in the movie. I can, hold the Option key and drag this cue down the timeline to this scene and say, oh, I wonder what this sounds like up against this scene. And I'll watch it down and say, oh yeah, okay, that theme works here, but it's too big. I need to change the instrumentation or whatnot. It's a way to audition previous cues in other places very easily, so I can get ideas about which, maybe I can start from one of the Logic sessions that has that theme in it and make a new cue out of it. So that's just yet another advantage to working this way. And then another advantage too is delivery to the film mixer, or if it's a TV show, the TV show mixer. They are working in Pro Tools. They've basically cornered the industry in that regard. And so when I'm done, I already have all of these cues in place. I just save this. I save this file as music delivery and send it to the show mixer, and it's all ready to go. And they import the tracks they need to into their file. In some more rare cases, this happened on the CNN documentary series, The Decades that I worked on. They wanted to also bring the music back into their Avid, where they were editing video, and I was able to create an OMF file or an AAX file I'm not even sure I know the difference at this point, but I know that I was able to accomplish this. I was able to save an AAX file that kept all of the music cues in place, attached to timecode, and they could even take that and bring it into their Avid Media Editor, and it would snap right into the right spot. So that aspect of using Pro Tools has come in handy for me as well. Going back to Logic here, so as I'm writing, I'll put Pro Tools online here, which means it is listening for timecode from another source, and I have Logic here spitting timecode out from this session. So if I hit play from here, it is going to play in Pro Tools. And then vice versa, when I'm done with this cue, I'll go into Pro Tools, I'll take this offline, I'll make Logic a slave by hitting a certain key command, and you see the cursor's blue here. So now it's the reverse. Logic is listening for timecode, and Pro Tools is the master, so I can hit record in Pro Tools, and it will drive Logic and record that audio in real time. And that's also, I usually use that as my last resort to listen to what I've written, make sure everything's mixed the way I want it to, and things like that, because what I print there is the final that's being sent to the mixer. Well, it's being sent to the director to get approved first, and then it eventually goes to the show or movie mixer. We could take a look at this scene here in a minute, but one other thing that I can show you in terms of tools that I use is, you may have seen the iPads I have on my desk here. I have two of them, and they serve very different functionalities. This one is the one that I use for Pro Tools, and it's running Avid Control. So I am able to, you know how I said I would put Pro Tools online or offline? I've got a button here to do that, so I don't have to go over to the application, bring it up, click that button. I've got it right here. I can also do things like mute the dialogue and the sound effects, or unmute the temp if I want to go ahead and listen to what the temp music is doing at the time. But it's really handy during the writing process. If I'm in Logic and I'm usually just constantly running through the music. If I'm playing something on top, or I'm mixing something with faders, sometimes you want to listen to how it's sounding up against dialogue, and other times you want to mute the dialogue and you just want to be focused on the music. So I have that at my fingertips here to just very quickly and easily go in and out of being able to listen to the dialogue. And then the other iPad is strictly for Logic, and there's a few different pages in this particular template. This one has a whole bunch of shortcuts that, obviously there's a lot of things that I have memorized that I can do on the keyboard, but in order to offload some of that from this brain up here, there's a lot of things that I do very often that I don't want to commit to memory, and I want to be able to hit a button for, like moving things a bar forward or back, shifting the volume up by plus 10, minus 10, I can make a whole sequence of MIDI be halftime or double time, um, and things like clearing automation. All those kinds of things that I'm doing on a regular basis, and I just want to have right here at the touch of a button. I've got those programmed on here, and yes, this takes a lot of time to do something like this, but it's an investment in the future. To how much time are you going to save versus how much time does it take to set this up? And I actually just revamped this template when I went down to one machine, but my previous template, I got I think 10 or 11 years out of it. So the amount of time that I saved in 10 or 11 years, I can't even possibly calculate. But the other pages in this template are like, here I have different different sections of the orchestra. Like, this is for the harps, and this is for the woodwinds, and this is for the brass, and I can change articulations just with the touch of a button, which also records a MIDI CC control into my Logic sequence that Logic chases and will always remember. So if I'm switching back and forth between articulations, Logic is always remembering where it's supposed to be, without getting, well, for those who may be wondering, there's key switching to change articulations in sample libraries, and a lot of them are pre-programmed to be key switched by a key on the keyboard. So, if you've got a violin that's really just G2 and above, you can have key switches down here where the violin doesn't play to change articulations. The problem with that is that Logic does not chase those notes. So you may be switching from spiccato here to legato here to harmonics here, and if you start playing in the middle of a sequence, Logic doesn't do the calculation with note key switches to know where it's supposed to be playing at any given point in time. So I end up switching all of those key switches to a MIDI CC control that Logic does chase. So now I can hit play anywhere in the sequence, and Logic does the calculation of what articulation it's supposed to be on at any given point in time. And that obviously saves a lot of headaches and helps with being flexible as to where you can start and stop in a sequence. And then for a while, I had been doing virtual faders on the iPad, and I was diehard hardware faders for a long time, and then I was like, I don't need those. I'll just do faders on the iPad, because this one piece of gear I was using was this honkin' beast on my desktop here. So I got rid of that, and I was just doing the iPad. But now I'm back. I missed the hardware faders. So I bought this little thing. I think the company's called MIDI Maker, and it is a Sparrow device, and you can get them in various numbers of faders. This one's 5, and I have it programmed for expression, modulation, volume, breath, and foot. So when I'm mixing and programming, I've got this right here to help me with my automation writing. So that's a lot of the technical side of the workflow. I'm happy to answer any additional questions you have about it at some point. For now, I can go ahead and play you this scene. let's do it full screen. How about that? This is the opening scene to that movie. And okay. Here it is.
This is the police. Can anyone hear me?
I would like to make a toast.
Please step back. Thank you. I'll handle it from here.
We've known each other for most of our lives. Since high school. Wow, am I that old?
Yes.
Miles, I'm counting on you to take care of my girl now. So, you better not let me down.
Hello? Police officer?
I mean, you both are truly like a couple out of one of those cheesy novels Sarah writes. I mean, I would know. I sell them for them.
Thank you very much. Excellent wife. Even when I'm old and wrinkly.
We're gonna be together forever. You'll never be free of me.
Officer 008 requesting a 1052. Address is 21340 Loma Verde. Copy?
Copy 1052 en route.
What happened here? Sir, what happened here?
All right, now you want to go see the rest of that, huh? So, yeah, I have other clips from other projects I've done, but I'm certainly, this might be a good point to open up the floor too, if anyone has any questions, because I want to make sure I have enough time for those. buddy.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you complete this project, do you have to have a written score of the whole project at the end?
Mm-mm. Nope. The
No
only
copyrights or any kind of legal, I'm not asking, probably from a legal standpoint, there's always people worried about using other things. Can you use like things that are on the internet, melodies and all that stuff?
no. So um, basically, when this project's done, I turn in the audio files to production, and most of the time, my work is work for hire. So whoever hires me, they own the music. I will always own the writer's share. So I'm able to collect the royalties for the writer's share, but in almost all cases, production owns the music and they own the publishing share. So that means that they not only collect on the publishing share royalties, but they're also completely in control of the music. So no, I cannot take this music, put it in another project. I can't even, without permission, perform this live in any other situation. I can play this for educational purposes for you right now. I'm not making any money off of this right now, but yeah, if there was ever any time that I was trying to make money off of this work, I don't own it. So legally, I don't have the right to do that.
So when a movie is made with a famous song, which is quite common, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. TV is probably different a little bit, but on a movie, that's usually a different composer and a different everything. They're just recorded somewhere else and injected into the movie, and they get all the rights for that.
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways. Some songs are licensed. So if it is a pre-existing song, then the production has to pay a licensing fee to the label or whoever owns that song to place it on their product. If it is a song that is written to be original for the film, then it is. I think circumstances vary depending on the artist in terms of who owns it. But again, it is mostly production owns that song. They have commissioned it.
Okay.
And,
All right.
the artist.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, in terms of written music, it really the only time stuff gets put on paper anymore is if it's being recorded. So a project like this that didn't have any live musicians on it, it's all just digital audio format. But some of the stuff that I have recorded, I do have sheet music for. But no, for copyright purposes, you don't have to have anything written down necessarily.
So how do you get paid for the projects? And when do you get paid?
Good question. Now that varies considerably. If you're doing an independent film, for instance, it's maybe a very small production, let's even say a student film, because they would work similarly. You would negotiate a fee, and you would sign a contract that says you are getting this much to write the score for this project, and then you need to determine one of two things. There's a composer's fee, and then a music recording fee that could be negotiated. That's typically on bigger films, but what that would say is, here's your money to write the music for this film, and we're going to spend this much to record, let's just say, a string orchestra. That's one way. Or what is more than likely the case on a smaller production, it's what's called a package fee. So they will negotiate, we will give you this lump sum, and that is for you to write the music and record what's necessary for the project. And then it's up to you to determine, okay, how much do I need to keep to pay my bills, and how much can I spend on recording, and can I achieve what they're asking for with this project? And sometimes it's really open-ended. They don't even know what they need. So what you would do is you would look at that and you would say, okay, I'm going to keep this amount. I've got this much to spend on recording. I could probably get a studio for a day and have 10 musicians. And you budget it all out and make sure that that works. And then that's what you propose back to production then. And it's always good to ask for half up front, have some sort of starting fee. It's just good faith to at least have some money exchanged before you get going, and then completion payment after you have turned everything in. And it can run the gamut in terms of whether they pay in a timely manner or not. I would say on the smaller productions, they're pretty good, actually, about paying quickly. The bigger studios, they take their sweet time. I mean, it could be months could go by before you get your completion payment at times.
So when you have to record, you hire the musicians, right? You have probably people that you work with all the time, and
Yeah.
you hand them the music. Do they get it ahead of time so they can practice, or they're just good musicians and they sit there and sight read it and that's that?
That's that. They, yeah, musicians in the industry who do this kind of work regularly, they sight read on the spot. It's very rare for someone to write some sort of part and send it to a musician early. It can happen, and especially if you're maybe writing a film that features a solo violin doing very virtuosic gestures, it would be courtesy to give the violinist that music ahead of time. But 99 times out of 100, there's not even time to do that. I mean, you're writing, orchestrating, copying the music up to the day before you're recording. So you show up, the musicians have a pile of music on their stand, and they are sight reading every cue for the first time as you're going through the music. But
And
especially in laws, sorry?
And you're conducting?
Yes. Usually I like to conduct my own stuff. And on a co-composer project like The Flash, which I could play a scene from that here, I co-wrote that with Blake Neely, and so when we recorded, he would conduct his cues and I would be in the booth producing, be in another set of ears, catching things that he might not catch on the podium because I'm hearing them in a controlled environment with the big speakers, and making sure to catch intonations, musicians coming in early or late or not playing together, things like that are the fine-tuning things that you might not catch everything while you're on the podium. And then vice versa. When I record my cues, I would go out and do that and have Blake produce in the booth. And for projects like Prodigal Son, where it was just me as the composer, I typically would have my orchestrator be the booth producer, and I would be out in the room conducting. Lots of composers do it. I mean, they do it both ways. Some like to conduct, some only like to be in the booth to produce, whether it's because they're not comfortable conducting or they just feel like they can catch more and focus on the music more in the booth. But I like that immediate ability to, look the violin section in the eyes and say, hey, can we try this instead, or something like that. Or if a player does something amazing, like a great cello solo or something, I like to be able to turn and say, that was amazing, great job. And you're, it's a lot more personal. But yeah, it happens always. And I recorded in Budapest for the first time last year for a CNN project. And that was a completely different experience because I was here. I was sitting right here looking at a monitor, listening to them play with a different conductor. And I'm not even in the booth there to produce. But they had that down really well. Very seamless. The conductor obviously spoke the languages and was the interpreter to all the musicians, and things moved very quickly. They had that really dialed in, but that was a completely different experience too. And they were still sight reading. So there are orchestras, Nashville, Los Angeles, New York, London, of course, Budapest. There's all these places you can go where these musicians do this for a living. And that's just what you can expect. It might be a little rough on the first pass, but then it'll be completely dialed in by the next pass, and you make minor adjustments and you move on because time is money. And if one of these musicians is not up to snuff, especially if it's an instrument that's more exposed, like a trumpet player, I'm a trumpet player. Then if they're not up to snuff, then they're probably not going to get called back very often. So you usually are working with the cream of the crop there.
Did you ever have to send a musician away during a recording session?
Thank goodness no. But there's definitely been some rough times where it's a fine line. You have to be encouraging. If someone keeps playing this solo out of tune time and time again, and you're like, again for intonation, again, then you're also going to be just crushing their ego too. So, and that's not what you want to do if you want to end up with a good final result. So it's definitely a tense time when something like that's happening and you're trying to build them up and you're trying to get what you want. But I have been in many of those situations, but never a time where I had to be like, all right, let's just, we got to call someone else. Thankfully.
Okay, so let's see another clip that you have.
Okay. So speaking of Flash, and something very recent here, Flash, the TV series that I worked on the CW, ended this past year after 9 seasons, 9 years of my life, this show. And we recorded the last 5 episodes of the show, so I flew out to Los Angeles 3 different times to do that. And this is a particular scene from the last episode that I thought I could share.
I can't believe you're leaving us. Feels like just yesterday you were comparing me to a daffodil seed. And look how you've blossomed.
Yeah, I will take care of Kesha, Bob, Laverne, Khalil, John Paul, all of them, I promise.
And I'm sure they will be excellent companions to you, just as they were to me.
Keon, if it wasn't for you last week.
I did the same thing any member of Team Flash would have done. And being a part of everything you've built over the last 9 years, it's been the honor of a lifetime. You're family now, Keon. You take care of yourself. I will.
Thank you for never giving up on me.
Of course.
It's supposed to be properly, what's it called? Like, initialized with a value. Just like whatever output I add to the initial, that's how everybody starts working.
Once I truly embraced my powers, I realized something. Nothing ever dies. We're all connected. We rise from dirt and we return to dirt. That's the natural order of things. What I was born to protect. But now my time in this mortal body is done.
I'm really gonna miss you.
Keep flourishing. Remember, I will always be with you.
Ascended, she didn't need her physical body anymore.
So she used her gifts to return Caitlin to her rightful place.
With her family.
I never thought I'd see you again.
I know, but I'm home again.
So who records the spoken dialogue?
For the actors?
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about like ADR and stuff like that, or?
So we know the music is your track, right?
Yeah.
But what about the spoken word? I mean,
most of it is captured on set, and this show was filmed in Vancouver, but they do ADR after the fact sometimes if the dialogue, it didn't come out right on set, or there's some technical problem, or sometimes they'll cheat and they'll realize something doesn't really make sense, so the camera will be on a different actor, and they'll have some actor say, well, maybe we should go to the coffee shop, or something like that. And all that's recorded then after the fact, which they'll do wherever the actors are. If they're still in Vancouver, they'll send them to a recording studio up there in Vancouver, or, some of them live in LA, some of them live in New York. And if they're back home or something, they'll send them to a local studio to record that kind of stuff.
They have to lip sync in reverse.
Yeah. If they have to record their dialogue over again, which is not always the case, but when they do, they watch themselves and they lip sync in reverse to themselves, and then sometimes if it's not quite on, there's a dialogue editor that goes in and does their magic to make it fit perfectly with their mouth. Yeah, that's a whole other job. That is not something I would want to do, but perhaps that's a career path for someone.
Nathaniel, is it typical, Nathaniel?
Yeah.
Is it typical or unusual for a director to change what you think is done?
Yeah, you mean to?
No, is it typical or unusual for them to critique it and change it, not just critique it, but is that the norm that somebody would say, this scene needs to do this, not being a musician or not really, just because they have a feel or something?
Yeah, and that's also, it depends who you're working with. Some filmmakers are pretty hands off, and they trust you. You have a dialogue about what you're trying to accomplish, and they may make comments here and there like, can we make this scarier, or what you get sometimes is, we didn't get the performance we wanted out of this actor. Can you make it seem like they're in more of a romantic?
Are they value added normally?
Here. Again, totally depends on who you're working with. I've worked with some where I'm like, that's kind of dumb and that doesn't make any sense, but I'm gonna do it because I'm a professional. And then I've been with some the guys I worked with on Prodigal Son. They would send me a whole slew, like a big email after every episode, and a lot of it would be like, this is great, love this, my favorite cue. And then it would just be something very little, like can we sting this harder, or and in those cases I think those guys were very focused on only having me change something if it benefited the story, and I'm all for those. I'm totally gonna get on board with someone who's really going for that, as opposed to just trying to say something because they feel like they need to be heard and they need to be in charge. And
Okay.
certainly have worked with those people.
All right.
So do you
Yeah.
ever hear that something has been finalized and then later they tell you, oh, by the way, we changed our mind?
Oh, I've watched things on air that I had no idea they chopped up, or they swapped out a cue for another cue, and just never told me. Or I've gotten things on the dub stage. Usually for a TV episode, for instance, they'll take anywhere between 2 and 3 days to mix the dialogue and the sound effects and the music and make everything sound perfect. And I mean, they go in and they are tweaking things, very much fine-tuning everything. And on day 3, a producer comes in and watches it down, and they change their mind about a cue, and I get a phone call, and I've got to fix that cue before the end of the day because they're out of the dub stage by the end of that day, and they've spent thousands of dollars renting out this space and hiring all these people to mix the music and the dialogue, and I have to do it right there and get it done. So yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of different scenarios over the years.
What's the brand of your keyboard?
This is the Complete Control that Native Instruments makes. It actually has a lot more functionality that I decided I didn't care for at one point, so I don't use it. I ended up putting my computer keyboard right here, but I like the feel of this one, and it still has my pitch wheel and mod.
Do you like that better than a Yamaha or something like that?
No, not necessarily. There's nothing wrong with a Yamaha. I think this has weighted keys, which I definitely want.
Yeah.
I never am comfortable with a keyboard that doesn't have at least some sort of pianistic feel to it. I'm not a pianist, and I would never perform piano for anyone, but I still
You're not a pianist?
I still appreciate that feel.
Oh.
No, I started as a trumpet player, and I can play well enough to write and do what I need to do, but I would never.
But aren't some of your projects totally digital?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But aren't you creating that?
Yeah, I mean, I can play well enough to, play.
That's amazing.
But if I'm playing something fairly difficult, you better believe I'm relying on some MIDI quantization and, and things like that, which I love. That Logic. This is not a brand new feature, but Logic in one of its more recent iterations You can quantize based on percentage, so it's not an all or nothing thing. If you've got a 16th note run, you don't have to quantize it exactly to the 16th notes, which then makes it sound a little more robotic and less human. There's a percentage, so you could dial it back to like 90% quantize that to the 16th note. So it'll get it close, but not exact. And
Good enough.
that's good for me too, because I'm not going to play it exact, but I can get it closer without making it start to sound robotic and unrealistic.
Okay, Nathaniel, thank you so much. I think our time is up. Are there any more questions from anyone who's here?
I had just a quick question. This works is fantastic, by the way. I'm not generally like into movies and things like that, but I might want to watch that movie. Just a side question. Have you ever been involved in things like sound effects or anything like that, or is your work purely just music and
Primarily just music. Now there's a fine line between music and sound effects, and with some of the projects that I've worked on, like the superhero shows, The Flash and Arrow, and those types of shows where, especially in action scenes, you're hitting every punch, you're hitting every explosion after the fact, things like that. You're not. I'm never actually trying to replace sound effects, but they're enhanced for sure by just the style of music that they wanted for those shows. But no, it's all score related.
All right, thank you. That was
Okay, anyone else? Okay, well,
Thanks, Nathaniel.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And thanks, Ricardo.
Have a good night. Looking stuff.
All right, you too.